This episode of Soul Food is brought to you by Nasiha, a Muslim youth helpline dedicated to improving lives one caller at a time. Please visit their website at nasiha.org to find out how you can help during the blessed month of Ramadan. That's NASEEHA.org.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. They say just as our bodies need nourishment to survive, our souls need to be nourished as well. But the question is, how often do we feed our souls? Welcome to Soul Food, a podcast about spiritual refinement. My name is Amjad Tarsin, and I invite you to embark with me on this journey inward to work on our souls. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to episode 10 of Soul Food. And it's going to be a little bit of a heavy episode, just to let you know, but we're going to talk about the dangers of violating the fast and the dangers of transgressing against Ramadan. So in this episode, we're going to cover the great warning the Prophet ﷺ gave us of violating the fast. We're going to look at the honor of worship, and then we're going to talk about how fasting is extremely essential to the believer and to the one who seeks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's good pleasure. So let's jump right in. Sometimes people might not really consider the severity of their mistakes. A lot of times I really believe that if people knew what was really at stake, they would take it more seriously. But a lot of times we make mistakes because it's not present in our minds what we're actually doing. As the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, when his people attacked him and they fought against him, and he made a prayer for them, he said, "Oh Allah, guide my people because they do not know what they are doing." They didn't really realize the severity of their decisions. So sometimes people might not realize the severity of breaking the fast, why it's important to educate ourselves about that. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, out of his concern for us and teaching us about the majesty and justice of God, he warned us of harming ourselves and rebelling against the divine will. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Whoever eats during the day in Ramadan without a valid excuse or illness, were he to fast for eternity, it would still not make up for the day he missed." This is narrated by Imam Tirmidhi. That if a person breaks their fast, even if they fasted for an eternity, it would not make up for the day in Ramadan that was an obligation upon them that they missed. So in other words, the opportunity, even though a person has to make up the day that they missed, that's called just the expiation. We'll talk about that in the next episode. They have to make it up, but it still will never be worth as much as the day that they actually missed. And this fasting in the month of Ramadan is one of the great pillars of the religion, so we have to have reverence for it. We have to be in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about it. As the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said in another hadith, that the boundaries of God are those things that he has made forbidden. So in other words, so don't approach them. When God sets boundaries, that they are the things that he has made forbidden, so be very careful about transgressing those boundaries. And he also said, peace and blessings be upon him, that one night the angels came to him and they took him upon a mountain, and he was shown some of the realities of the hereafter. And this is a heavy hadith, and this is not something to just scare you or to instill some sort of unhealthy fear, but it's something so that we can recognize that there are consequences to our actions in the hereafter. And if the nafs doesn't know how severe the consequences are, it sometimes will get the best of us, and our own nufus will fool us into harming ourselves. And the devils will whisper us to do something that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but when we have that requisite knowledge, we're in a safer place. So the Prophet ﷺ said he saw some of the realities of the hereafter, and he saw people being punished, and their lips were being cut, and there was blood flowing from their mouths. And then he asked, he said, who are these people? And the angels told him, these are people who would eat at times when they should have been fasting. These are people who would violate the fast, is that they would have their lips cut and blood would flow from them. And this is just for us to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord of majesty. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so mighty and powerful that if we are not in awe of the things that He has forbidden us to do, then there are very serious consequences. It's not to make us despair, but it is to make us aware of the realities of what's actually at stake. Now that brings us to the next point, and this is the honor of worship. And another important way to look at fasting and the reverence and the value of this obligation that has been put upon our shoulders is that you need to think about what you are being given when you fast. When a person fasts, when you are fasting, Allah presents you to the angels and shows you to the angels and says, look at my servant. They have left aside their desire and food for my sake. That when you are fasting, there is no greater sense of recognition that you would ever get in the world. If you thought about being given an award in front of your most respected peers, if you were recognized among the people that you valued the most in this world, and you were shown to them and presented to them, and you were given an honorary reward, it would not be as exciting or valuable or meaningful as the Lord of majesty and infinite beauty and generosity showing you to His exalted angels. It would pale in comparison to the reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presenting you to the angels who carry His lofty throne and the angels who are brought near and these beings of honor and exaltation and elevation. So that's what's at stake, is the great opportunity and the great consequence, because this is the purpose for which you were created. To live up to the divine command so that your soul can be elevated. And when things have great rewards, if we do not take them seriously, then they also have great consequences as well. And that brings us to the next point, which is about how fasting is so essential for the believer. It is one of the foundational acts of worship. And if we really want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love and good pleasure, then we cannot take this thing lightly. We have to have awe and reverence. A hadith states that the knots of Islam and the foundations of religion are found in 3 things. Whoever abandons one of them is a disbeliever. Once again, the Prophet ﷺ, he's warning us. This isn't the kind of religion that is meant to make you feel humiliated or to make you feel hopeless. That's not what we're talking about. That's not the way of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, at all. But he is concerned for the believers. He's concerned for humanity. He wants what's good for them. So he is warning them. One of the names of the Prophet is that he was sent as a nadhir. He was sent as someone to warn people of what would harm them. So he said that whoever abandons one of these things, they're that important that if you abandon one of them, then a person is essentially a disbeliever. And we seek refuge in God from that. He said the first is that witnessing that there is no God but God. If someone abandons that, then they have abandoned everything. And then the second is the obligatory prayers. If a person abandons that, then they have no religion. And the third is fasting Ramadan. That these 3 things, these are some of the most major rites and symbols of religion itself. And if we lose reverence for these, then we lose everything. Then we really don't have a foundation upon which we can build our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So be careful from ever being tempted into breaking your fast. Sometimes for whatever reason, we're tested, or we're having a rough day, or the shaitan is getting the best of us, or our nafs. You might just be really hungry and really thirsty, but for whatever reason, never fall into the temptation of breaking your fast, because it is one of the most essential acts of worship. It is one of the foundational pillars of Islam, and it is one of those three things that if a person loses it, then they really have no deep and valid sense of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we seek refuge in God from that. So the reward for keeping the fast and the honor that you get out of it is so great, and the consequences also great for abandoning it. So we seek refuge in Allah from that. So that brings us to the call to action. Be very careful of ever violating your fast by eating or otherwise, whether it's food or other ways of breaking your fast. But also remember, in addition to the physical fast, not to violate your fast by saying or looking at something forbidden. Do not violate your fast spiritually nor physically. So to be very careful of honoring and preserving this extremely valuable pillar of worship and pillar of religion in your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala physically and spiritually. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. We ask Allah that He protect us from any of the reasons for being punished, and that He treat us with His complete generosity and mercy, and that we always turn back to Him when we have shortcomings, and we always seek His forgiveness, and that He honor us with the best of what He honors His most beloved and righteous servants. وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you for listening to Soul Food. To subscribe to the show, visit soulfood.fm, where you can subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, or by email. If you're on iTunes, please also leave us a rating and a review. It helps more people discover the show.